Hello everyone, I'm here to tell the remarkable story of Bill Leton, a retired firefighter from the central coast of California. Bill had an extraordinary near-death experience back in 1994 while he was on duty, and it profoundly changed his perspective on life and death. For many years, Bill couldn't openly discuss what happened to him. Back then, there weren't many resources or people to turn to for answers, so he kept his story to himself for about 15 or 16 years. It wasn't until after he retired that the memories came flooding back with intensity, pushing him to seek understanding. This journey led Bill to explore ancient knowledge, the wisdom of shamans, and the insights of Native Americans, which offered a different view from the history, religion, and science we've been taught over the past few centuries. But let's start at the beginning with the events of 1994 and the near-death experience that altered Bill's life forever. In 1994, Bill was working as a firefighter at Station 11, a paramedic engine in Goleta, near Santa Barbara. At that time, a severe flu epidemic was sweeping through the area. Emergency rooms were overflowing with sick patients, and the emergency services, including Bill and his team, were constantly responding to calls. They were doing their best to help under incredibly challenging conditions. One day, Bill and his crew were called to assist a woman in a dire medical emergency. She was shut in her room, with all the drapes drawn, suffering terribly from the flu. Without hesitation, Bill sprang into action. He climbed across her bed to place an oxygen mask on her face. Just as he adjusted the mask, she exhaled, and Bill inhaled at the same moment. He felt something enter his system, a sensation he couldn't ignore. Within a couple of days, Bill became extremely ill, worse than he had ever been in his life. The sickness was overwhelming, and it progressed to the point where he needed urgent medical attention. Struggling with severe dehydration, Bill recalled getting out of bed, feeling weak and disoriented. He was vomiting, losing fluids rapidly, and when he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. His face was gaunt, almost skeletal, and the dark circles under his eyes were alarming. Checking his pulse, Bill noticed his heart rate was racing at around 150 beats per minute. When he tried to feel his radial pulse at his wrist, he couldn't detect anything, which indicated his blood pressure was dangerously low, likely below 80. Realizing the severity of his condition, Bill knew he couldn't wait any longer. He asked his niece to call 911, and soon after, Santa Barbara County Fire arrived. They started a couple of IV lines to hydrate him and rushed him to a hospital in Santa Maria under emergency conditions, known as Code 3. At the hospital, Bill found himself in a ward packed with people suffering from similar flu symptoms. The doctor in charge was overwhelmed, prescribing the same treatment to nearly everyone. Something for pain, similar to morphine, and something for nausea. After about half an hour, with a couple of IV bags administered, Bill felt a slight improvement. He thought he might be well enough to go home and continue treatment from there. He was ready to leave, sitting up on the bed, when a nurse approached him. She informed Bill that, per the doctor's orders, everyone was receiving the same medication, no exceptions. Being a cooperative patient, Bill agreed, even though he wasn't experiencing severe pain or nausea at that moment. According to Bill's wife, who was by his side, the nurse administered the medication, a synthetic morphine called Nubain, and an anti-nausea drug, all at once. Almost immediately, the effects were dramatic. Bill's eyes rolled back in his head, as if in a cartoon, and he collapsed straight back onto the bed he had been trying to get out of. This sudden reaction startled everyone in the room, including the medical staff. They quickly sprang into action, administering Narcan, a drug used by paramedics to reverse opiate overdoses. Narcan works almost instantly to counteract the effects of opiates in the system. They gave Bill a couple of doses, started additional IV lines, and tilted his bed to a head-down position to help with circulation. At that point, Bill was unresponsive. His blood pressure was critically low, registering at around 40/0, and the hospital staff couldn't stabilize him immediately. They moved him to the intensive care unit, where he remained through the night. The next morning, the medical team told Bill's family that the only reason he likely survived this ordeal was his exceptional physical condition. As a triathlete who competed in Ironman events, Bill had an incredible capacity for oxygen perfusion, which prevented his organs from completely shutting down despite the crisis. What happened during that night, however, was far beyond the physical realm. The synthetic morphine had caused Bill's blood vessels to dilate dramatically, a condition known as vasodilation. This meant that the fluid in his system wasn't enough to maintain proper circulation or perfusion, leading to a near-fatal state. While Bill's body lay in the hospital bed, unconscious, something extraordinary occurred. Somewhere in the middle of the night, around 1:0 or 1:30 a.m., Bill's consciousness left his physical body. He later described this as one of the most incredible sensations he had ever experienced. It felt as though he had been released from a hot, stuffy closet into a vast, open space. Suddenly, Bill found himself surrounded by what he called giant colored stars. He was soaring through this cosmic landscape, feeling an overwhelming sense of freedom and joy. These stars, or orbs as some might call them, seemed to welcome him with an indescribable love and warmth. Bill felt like he was no longer confined to his human form, but had expanded into a huge cloud of energy, a state that was both exhilarating and liberating. The feeling was beyond words, something he likened to a cosmic ecstasy, as if someone was pouring warm honey over his mind, flowing through every nerve in his being, making him feel truly alive in a way he had never experienced on Earth. As Bill moved through this otherworldly space, he was struck by a profound realization. He couldn't understand how he had forgotten his true nature, his real identity. How had he been so convinced that he was just a person with relationships, problems, and earthly concerns? In that moment, none of it seemed real. Bill understood that life on Earth was an illusion, a kind of game or trick that comes with incarnating into the material world. The revelation shook him to his core, yet it also filled him with peace and clarity. He continued to glide through this space, surrounded by these loving, colorful orbs, feeling a sense of acceptance, joy, and a deep homecoming, as if he was being welcomed back to where he truly belonged. Suddenly, Bill's journey took a new turn. He found himself landing in a place that felt solid and real, unlike the ethereal space he had been flying through. This new environment had indirect lighting, tables, and various pieces of equipment. There were beings present, and right in front of Bill stood 3 short, stocky figures dressed in dark robes with hoods. He could see parts of their faces, and they were smiling broadly, their eyes shining with brightness. These beings seemed delighted to see him, asking a flurry of questions while giggling among themselves. Bill felt a bit confused by their playful demeanor, but their appearance reminded him of characters from a movie he had seen years ago called Communion. In the film, actor Christopher Walken interacts with small, elf-like beings in a spaceship, and these figures looked strikingly similar, though far more good-natured and mischievous. They bombarded Bill with personal questions like, "How was it? What can you tell us? And what did you learn?" One of them turned to the others and said with a chuckle, "He doesn't remember us," which prompted more laughter. Bill admitted to himself that he felt a vague sense of familiarity, though he couldn't quite place it. Then, another being appeared, one who seemed to be in charge, though not in a strict or authoritative way. This figure was tall and wispy, almost like a slender, vaporous version of a cartoon character, or a cactus made of mist. When this being moved, it was as if Bill was watching someone underwater. Parts of the figure would separate, and then catch up with the rest. The tall being had a wide, radiant smile and the brightest eyes Bill had ever seen. As this figure approached him, Bill felt an intense emotional reaction. His chest expanded, his throat tightened, and he was on the verge of bursting into tears, overwhelmed by the immense love radiating from this entity. It was a feeling so powerful that it nearly consumed him. The atmosphere in this place wasn't formal or organized. The three smaller beings continued to giggle and bounce around playfully, while the tall, wispy figure chuckled and smiled, exuding a sense of lightheartedness. At one point, Bill declared that he wasn't going back to his earthly life. He asked if they were going to review his life, expecting some kind of formal process. The tall being let out a deep, resonant laugh, the deepest Bill had ever heard, and said, "Sure, let's do that. How do you want to start?" Bill found this response surprising, as it wasn't what he had anticipated. He shared a few stories from his life, nothing major, just small regrets. One memory was about a park ranger job on an island that his wife had wanted him to take. It would have meant spending a summer alone with her on the island, but Bill had chosen another job instead. He thought it might have been nice to have taken that opportunity, but it was the only regret that came to mind. The tall being listened, and then said, "Okay, that's enough. It's time to go back." Bill was stunned. Go back? He couldn't believe it. He protested, saying there was no way he was returning to Earth. He felt he belonged in this place. But the tall being was firm, telling Bill that he had things left to do and that he must return. The three smaller beings seemed to be reassigned, disappearing to another part of this mysterious facility, while the tall figure stepped closer to Bill and reiterated, "Time to go back." Bill made one last attempt to stay, pleading that the only people who would miss him were his wife and parents, and they would get over it after a couple of weeks. They were strong, he argued, and would persevere. The tall being found this amusing and chuckled again, but his decision was final. "No, you're going back," he said. Just like that, the environment around Bill began to dematerialize, breaking apart as if he was tuning into a different channel. Bill later reflected that he believes our perceived reality, along with other dimensions, operates on different frequencies or channels, all existing simultaneously around us. As this place faded, Bill felt a distinct descending sensation, a drop in frequency, and the tall being evaporated from his view. He found himself dropping into darkness, moving closer to his physical body. Before fully returning, Bill encountered a place that deeply unsettled him. He was reluctant to admit this for years, but he felt it was important for others to know. This place was close to our physical reality, yet it was lonely and dismal, a space he wouldn't want anyone to linger in. It was a stark contrast to the love and light he had experienced moments before. Soon after, Bill was back in his body. A few hours later, he regained consciousness in the hospital, hooked up to various pieces of equipment. He noticed his blood pressure readings on the monitor starting to climb, initially at around 44/0. He would wake briefly, then slip back into unconsciousness, each time checking the numbers as they slowly improved to the 60s, and then the 70s. A nurse eventually came by and saw that Bill was awake. Surprised, she said she needed to inform the doctor, as they hadn't been sure of his outcome. Bill, still reeling from his experience, asked her why he was back. He told her he had been home, with his best friends, brothers he had known forever. How had he returned to this reality? He was convinced he had bought the farm, a phrase meaning he thought he had died. The nurse responded with a gentle smile, saying, "Honey, you were in escrow, but you fell out, and now you're back with us. You're going to have to get over it." Bill found her words poignant, though he couldn't help but feel a deep sadness for the next few days. It wasn't clinical depression, but a profound sense of loss for the place he had left behind. He could feel the memory of that other realm slipping away, fading to the point where he might convince himself it hadn't happened at all. Despite this, Bill felt compelled to share his experience with others. He told everyone he knew that there was nothing to fear about death. He described it as a complete misunderstanding, an absolute upgrade, a transformation worth millions in value, happening in an instant. When friends or colleagues came to him after losing a child or a parent, struggling with grief, Bill offered them comfort with his story. He assured them that no one truly dies, they simply slip out of the physical form and return home. Bill emphasized that even after leaving his body, he was still himself at his core. His sense of humor, the inner dialogue in his mind, it was all intact. The transition was seamless. He was still Bill, just in a different place. This realization was a stretch for many to grasp, but it was his truth. He wanted people to understand that we never truly lose anyone, not even our pets. They're all still here, right beside us, in a different frequency or channel of existence. However, not everyone was receptive to Bill's story. After a couple of weeks, a coworker subtly warned him that people were starting to talk about him. It was a gentle nudge to stop sharing his experience. Bill found this frustrating. Here he was, carrying what he believed was the most wonderful news any person could ever hear, a message of hope and reassurance about life after death, and yet he was encouraged to keep it hidden. Reluctantly, Bill decided to stay silent, bottling up his story for 15 years. It wasn't until 2010, after he retired, that he felt ready to revisit and share this transformative chapter of his life. Bill's journey didn't end with his return to his body. It marked the beginning of a deeper quest for understanding, one that continues to shape how he sees the world and our place in the greater cosmic story.